Hey.
What's up?
Okay, my friend, thank you so much. My brother from another, Juan Carlos. I'm honored to have you on the Guided Home podcast. Before the podcast, I was sharing that the first podcast I ever was on was yours when you had one. You are the founder of the Modern Macho. You're also a wellness facilitator, advocate, and fatherhood coach. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So tell me,
excited.
what is the Modern Macho? Tell me what the Modern Macho is and the journey that got you there.
All right, we're gonna get deep into it already. I like it. I'm here for it.
We don't mess around.
Yeah, I like this. So the Modern Macho was started during the pandemic. I'm a tradesman, electrician. Got into the union when I was 20 years old, and I found out I was gonna be a dad.
Okay.
So I had to grow up really quickly, right? So I first generation, oldest of three. I grew up with a lot of adversity. I mean, think of the most traditional. I mean, Spanish was my first language, and It was just, I believed in all the spanking and being a real man and what that looked like, all that stuff, right? And so I got into the trade, and that's when I found out I was going to be a dad, and I didn't have tools. I didn't have support. My dad would always say growing up, you know, like if you have kids when you're young, you're an idiot. You ruined your whole life, right? And so I think he planted that seed where when I found out I was going to be a dad, I'm like, I'm that idiot. Like, here I am, you know? And so I made a lot of mistakes growing up, right? I coped a lot with alcohol.
Okay.
Got involved with drugs. And but it was also a very confusing time because I was doing the things I thought a man was supposed to do. Like, I was working 50, 60-hour weeks, right? I was making money. I bought my first house at 20 years old.
Wow.
So I'm like, I just got into the union. I'm making all this money. I'm going to live the dream. I'm finally going to be a man, right? I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be doing, and yet I wasn't happy about it. I wasn't proud of how I was showing up. I wasn't living a life with integrity. So it took a lot of cycles of falling apart, coping with women, coping with the drinking, and just relationship after relationship where I was like, dude, something's got to change. And so it wasn't until right before the pandemic, with a really, really hard breakup. I can say now, like, that was supposed to be the one.
Okay.
That was the one. And, I remember her telling me, like, my mom got deported when I was in high school. And I remember my ex telling me, like, have you ever thought about going to a therapist? Go into therapy. And I remember in that moment thinking, like, why would I go to a therapist if I have you? I didn't have the tools or the verbiage or the knowledge to understand even the privilege behind being able to say something like that. And after that happened, I had a really, really bad night where I was ready to take my life. The drinking went a lot further than it needed to go. And I think that was the day that it hit me like, no, something does need to change. Like, this is you. And I think for a long time I told myself, this isn't you. Like, the guy that cheats, the guy that yells, the guy that spanks his kid, the guy that, thinks he's tough because he drinks all the time, the guy that shows up drunk to work, but shows up and takes pride in that, like, I told myself that wasn't me. And for the first time I was like, maybe this is you.
Yeah.
This is who you are, dude. And what to do with that, I didn't want to shame myself for it, but I knew that it was like, I have to admit this. I have to admit this. And so it took a couple tries of me going to therapy. The first time that I went, I personally thought it was kind of corny, right? Like, I went and my therapist is like, hey, how do you feel from 1 to 10? And I'm like, what is this, And I'm like, hell no, this ain't for me. Like, I'm not doing this. Yeah. And so then I found someone again and kind of had a similar experience. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. And it wasn't until my third therapist that I remember telling her that one of the things I was noticing was that, I loved my family. I loved being in connection with them and being in community with them. And I was also realizing that there was times where I really needed to talk about things or I could really use support. And, the only way that I felt that we bonded was talking smack. And it's like, and I still do it, right? Like, I love talking smack.
Yeah.
I have thick skin, so I'm all about it. But it's like, man, sometimes I really want to go through some things and talk about it and hold space for each other. And so I told her that I was really struggling with that. And I remember her laughing and just like putting her head down and kind of doing like one of these, like almost like, you know?
Yes.
And I just remember feeling so much comfort like I felt seen. I felt validated. Like, whoa, like you just saved me, 6 months, a year of me having to explain to you what I'm even talking about, you know? And I think that's when it hit me that it was like, dude, there's no way I'm the only guy that's out there. Wow. There's no way that I'm the only one that, I remember being intimate with a woman and not being in it. And I remember my inner voice was like, stop being a baby about this. Like, do it. Like, you're not a real man if you're not enjoying this. And I was like, dang, how sad. Now looking back, I'm like, how sad that instead of me honoring myself and setting my boundary and just be like, hey, you know what? I'm not in this. I was fighting myself and telling myself like, no, dude, you want to be a man? You better do this.
Yeah.
And so I started to get to know myself a little bit, started to figure out where this stuff was coming from. And then shout out to my best friend. I hit that dude up and was like, hey, bro, maybe we should start documenting this. I didn't see representation. I'm like, there's conversations on don't hit your kids. There's conversation on don't yell. There's conversations on we shouldn't be drinking excessively. And like, I know that.
Right.
I've known that my whole life. And so I'm like, but how do we solve this? How do we get to the bottom of this? And I'm like, well, shit, we got to have the conversations. And I'm like, there's a lot of things that I haven't talked about, right? How in order for me to feel accepted in my groups, I got to share pictures of women. I got to talk about what I was doing last night and how much I drank. And I'm like, it's weird because we're connecting, but then when I need you guys there, you're not there. And those are choices that I'm making. Right. And I got to take ownership of that. And so, so we were like, dude, let's just start this. And so that's where it came up. And I was like, what do we call this? And I'm like, Modern Macho, which is a perfect representation of redefining what masculinity was for me. And in order for me to do that, I had to look in the mirror. And I also had to acknowledge that while I didn't make the decision to grow up with the beliefs that I had, I was choosing to uphold them.
Yeah.
And to subscribe to them, right? And I didn't feel like I was finding any spaces that gave me the grace for that understood where they came at me with empathy and accountability from a place of compassion, And now here we are.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So there's a couple of things. You just said choosing to uphold them is very powerful. We don't realize that we have a choice in the matter. We think that this is how it is. Like, this is who I am. This is the family I come from. These are our, our generational things that we do, or, this is the accepted thing that we do. And we don't realize that we have a choice, and we can choose to uphold the norm and the status quo of our family or familial line, or we can choose something different. And it sounds like you came to that precipice point in 2020. You found out you were going to have your son. And there were some things in your life that you were just like, wait a minute. It's like you were coming up to an edge.
Yeah, I'm like, I keep trying to use the same tools and get different results. And I'm like, this ain't working.
Yes.
And then, my kid's getting older at that time too. And I'm starting to see parts of myself in him. And I'm like, dude, I'm doing the same things. Yes. And I'm like, I feel guilty going to bed because I'm spanking my kid. And also I'm not getting any guidance on how to do anything differently.
Right.
And I'm being attacked for doing it. Right. Which to be fair, was not a good thing to do. However, I didn't have the tools to be like, well, then help me.
Right. What is another way?
Yes. Like, okay, you're right. I shouldn't be hitting him. What do I do? Like, what do I do? And then, and it's such a vulnerable thing to do too, right? To say like, dude, I don't know what to do. Dude, I didn't have the guide. Dude, I'm doing this with the tools that I've been giving. Right. And they kind of suck.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's great.
And like, to admit that, I think of now courage to me was being this tough, quote unquote stoic. And I realized that for me, I was becoming very good at suppressing my emotions. The best way to handle them is just don't feel them.
Yeah.
Right. And it was getting me nowhere. And it was like, dude, you're going to have to start practicing what it's like to feel them.
Yeah. So then you started the Modern Macho, and that was a podcast format, right? Yeah.
So we started the podcast, and the whole idea was, we don't know what the heck we're doing.
Yeah.
But also I found at that time, I was like, every podcast that I see talks about the story later. Right? Like back in the day, or hey, now I'm in this rich house, or like now I have this successful life. Yes. This is what I had to go through. And me, like, I really value vulnerability because I think that's such an important piece to build trust, right? To build community. And so, and man, I'm really going through it. So I was like, dude, why don't we just document this as we're figuring it out?
Brilliant.
But you know what I mean? Like, let's talk about what it's going to be like to finally admit that we're wrong, that we don't know something, or that we learned something. And then 3 weeks later, we're like, actually, we were way off.
Yeah.
And so we almost, in a way that gave us a sense of control, we were like, let's just dive into it.
Yeah.
Right. And who's going to tell us we're wrong?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what we feel is going to be valid. And so that's what we did. And then through that, like I said, the pandemic kind of helped us because everything was virtual. So then we were like, hey, guys were reaching out. We want to be a part of it. Cool. Let's make a call. And then at one point we had like 10 guys in these Zoom calls, and we were all just like, we don't know what we're doing here, but we know that we want a support. We know we want a better community. We want to do better. And so then as I was getting to know myself, I also was taking a second to realize that I wanted to do a better job of how I showed up, right? Of what I wanted to model, right? And so then we're like, let's do pool tournaments. And we started getting guys to go to pool tournaments, and like we would hang out and we would just vibe. And then the conversations were a lot more intentional.
Okay.
And my thing was the guys that I work with, the guys out on the field, I was thinking about them. And I'm like, if I create a men's circle, first of all, they're going to talk smack. Second of all, like, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, let's bring some cultural awareness to this.
Yes.
Like, how would we do this? And I'm like, well, let's have a social hour.
Oh,
now, that to me sounds so much more like comforting, right? It sounds more appealing to me and more welcoming. So I'm like, yeah, I'm down. So we did that. Through those pool tournaments, the funding that we were able to put together, we actually were able to help a gentleman to sponsor his first 2 sessions of therapy.
Oh, wow.
Like, he was ready, he was down, and we're like, bro, go for it. Like, let's see how that goes, you know? And then it turned into meeting a lot of amazing individuals, therapists, Reiki masters, individuals like yourself, dude. Like, now I'm still sometimes in disbelief, like, how the F did I get here?
Yes.
And then I have to remind myself, like, we've manifested this vision though.
Yeah.
Like, we've put in some work to get to these points.
Yes.
And I think even like, for me, it's inspiration to keep going, right?
Yeah.
We did the pool tournaments. Then after that, we started doing toy drives.
Oh, wow.
Right, getting involved with that. And then I think when the shift really happened was someone that I had met through the work that was at first giving donations when we were doing the toy drives, and we were doing food drives as well. She offered me an opportunity to volunteer for the county, working on our Nurturing Father program. And so that's when it really opened my eyes, because that's when I learned that I was really wrong about how I was trying to approach things. Because I was trying to dismantle the man box and create another box. Okay. Yes, it looked better.
Yeah.
Right? But I was still trying to basically say, like, men, we should not be this. We should be this.
So talk about dismantling the man box. What is that? What was that? What did that look like?
So when I started learning about this man box, I'm like, okay, so basically this is the kind of men that we are supposed to be, right? These are the things that we've been told that are acceptable, that are not, right? Obviously, anger maybe isn't the healthiest, but it's just more acceptable. That's how men are, right? Not being vulnerable, right? Being disconnected to our emotions, sometimes sucking things up, manning up about it. We don't cry. All these pieces that we've really created, right? And we've put into this box and said, if you want to be a man, this is how you fit in it.
Right.
And I was like, F that. We need to start breaking this up. And also the biggest thing, which is, let's figure out the yes. Okay. What is the yes in that, right? Like, I'll give you an example. Like, when I was cheating, right?
Okay.
My thing was like, that's not right. But I also learned over time that it was like, what I craved was connection.
Right.
There was a yes in there.
Oh, that's brilliant. That I like how you term that. Like, what is the yes in there? It's almost like the positive aspect as opposed to the negative aspect.
Because it's very easy, right? Like, for me to beat myself up and be like, stop.
Sure.
But there's like, it's also it was very scary for me, because then my whole identity goes away. And that's very scary, right?
Yeah.
Especially without support, without tools, without knowledge, verbiage, nothing. I'm like, I don't want to do this. And so understanding that there was a yes underneath that was like, oh, so I crave connection. But the problem is I don't know how to communicate because I wasn't given tools to. Right? Like, let's get down to the foundation of what we've built, right? Because right now we're just trying to change the pieces up top. Like, let's get down to the nitty gritty. And I think therapy really helped with that. EMDR was a huge eye opener. And so dismantling that, then I was like, well, how do I want to be? And so then I started thinking about the things that I value, right? There's like, I value connection, you know, I value integrity, I value vulnerability, I value joy, right? Like these are the things that matter to me, peace, right? And so again, where I was wrong is it was like, hey guys, I was basically almost trying to tell people like, don't be this, be this. And I'm like, well, it's a nicer box, but you're creating a box again.
Okay. Yeah.
You're putting people in a box again. And I'm like, that's not right.
Okay.
So I wanted to learn more. And I'm like, well, how do I approach this? How do I learn more? So then I think once I started to volunteer with the Nurturing Fathers program, that was a very eye-opening experience where I started learning of like how to help fathers be the most authentic version of themselves, right? Where we're just working with the tools. Yeah. Your house is going to look different from my house, right? We're not building the same house. Yeah. We never are. That's never the idea. I'm here to help you use similar tools that can help you build ultimately the house that you want for yourself. Not that you've had to, but that you want to now, right? And so, yeah, it's been very beautiful. It was a 13-week program. I did that for about 2 years. I still help out with that. Another thing that I was really wrong about too that opened my eyes was I know that I went in there kind of defensive. Okay. Because I thought about the guys that I work with and I love them, right? Shout out to all my electricians out there. But I also know that like the initial thought is pushback. Yeah. Right. Where I'm like, hey dude, have you thought about therapy? Oh, I'm not crazy. I'm like, fair. Like I thought the same, like I've shared this with you before. I used to hide from my own family when I started going to therapy. And I would tell my dad like, hey, can you help me watch my son? I got to go do a side job. And the messed up part about that is that, you know, it'd be a simple job where I would only need about an hour, but I would stay out of the house for at least like 5. Oh, wow. So my dad wouldn't question like, what kind of jobs are you doing? You know, and I didn't understand that at the time, but then going through therapy and realizing like, dang, I don't even feel safe enough in my own family. Right? And it's no shade to them, right? Because again, they are working with the tools that they had. Correct. So I just had to acknowledge it so I could take ownership on how it was affecting me and how I could change the cycles, right?
And how you interact with that, right?
Exactly, yeah. Like what I'm gonna do with that, right? And what I want to do with that. And so, yeah, I was like, man, I'm gonna show up in this class, and these guys are just gonna be pushing back. And you know, a lot of them have been dealing with child protective services also. So it's like I'm going in there kind of like one fist up, just ready to start. And very quickly, it was such a humbling experience to realize, like, yo, these dads want to be dads. Wow. Like, these dudes are down. They don't have tools. Yeah. Nobody's helping them. And I thought of myself, you know, I looked at them and I was just like, nah, if I'm going to be complaining and thinking about my son and spending what I was telling myself at the time, if I'm going to be here bitching, you know, what I would tell myself about this, I got to do something. And, you know, it was hard. It was hard because, you know, at first jumping into it, especially meeting social workers too, I'm like that initial want to do everything, show up for everyone and fix everything, and having to go back to therapy and realize, where is that coming from? This is you. Like you know, this isn't helping you. This isn't helping you. You need to reflect more. You need to take more ownership of this. And finding the balance between that and just taking it one dude at a time, and learning more about myself, you know, and seeing that it's been very, very inspiring to see men and dads and father figures to go from, you know, these kids are soft and the problem is we can't spank our kids anymore, to like, damn, I get to incorporate discipline in a way that doesn't cost me the relationship with my kid. Ooh. It's like, damn, dog, like, wow. Let's go. Yes. Let's go. And that lights a fire in my ass. Yes. And that's what brings me here now, to continue to grow, to continue to have the conversations and, you know, tools, more and more and more tools.
Yeah. Wow. That was very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that, for your vulnerability. What you just said is that, you know, what really hit me is that, you know, these men are saying, no, we want to be dads. Like, we want to do a better job. We want to do a good job. We want a relationship with our kid, and not knowing how to do that, never being taught that, but really desperately wanting the help and never having the voice to be able to say like, I'm struggling. I want to be a good dad. I have no idea. And then on the other side of that is after these 13-week programs and after you're able to work with them, that they're having these tools to say like, okay, I don't have to hit my child. I can allow myself to feel what I'm feeling, recognize it, and then parent in a different way and enforce discipline, but from a place of a loving response. And that's all the difference in the world. Like that sends a totally different message. Oh man,
dude,
that was big. That was heavy. And so you're talking about tools. So when you and I first met was a year ago last June. So June 2023. And Vidi and I and you and another therapist, we kind of got together to create this container, this retreat, this workshop for men. And that's when I first met you. You know, we had met online and we had meetings here and there, but the first time I met you was at that point. And so you were kind of stepping into a new realm. Can you talk about that and talk about the tools then that you learned and picked up? And
yeah, definitely. I think at the time, one of the things that we were doing with the podcast is we started shifting from just us documenting the journey to now like bringing on guests. And one of the intentions behind bringing guests was like, we wanted to bring people that had tools, but also we wanted to humanize the experience, right? Because it was like, oh, she's a Reiki master, you know, or like, oh, she's a therapist, like, like all these titles that we were seeing that for me was like, hey man, they're people just like us, just like a coach, like they, you know what I mean, they're good at what they do, but like they're people, you know. And so we wanted to really kind of break a little bit of that barrier because we knew it was one of the many issues that was sometimes holding men back from going to therapy. So that's where, you know, we kind of talked a little bit, you said, and then you guys reached out with this great opportunity. I think at that time too, I was like in this I'm down phase where I was just like, look, I know the stuff that I've been using, the tools that I've had aren't working. I don't know what new tools I want to bring to the table, but like, I'm down. Like, I'm just going to try stuff, just see what happens. You know? And so you guys reached out and you were like, hey, we want to put this breathwork thing together. What are your thoughts? And I was like, oh, this is sick. Like, I'm down. Like, it was a no brainer. Like, I was just like, there's benefits to it. I was like, obviously everything you're saying, I've been able to do it by, you know, having a little sip of whiskey before bed or like, so I'm like, okay, I'm down. Like, let's just see what happens, you know? And then, it was really cool because I think in us meeting, there was also like a lot of chemistry where I think we were just vibing and understood like how we wanted to approach this. Right. And, you know, I thought of myself, I thought of where I was, I thought of where I used to be. And I was like, well, you know, I would have thought this was hokey not that long ago. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, I don't know about this.
You're like, it's all yoga.
Yeah, I'm just like, this is all BS. Yeah, like my first experience with it, right? So I was like, okay, how do I approach this? And that really was it, right? The conversation was just, F it, let's try it. That's what it was. And I think that was my mindset going into it. And it kind of stayed that way the whole time. I never thought I would even lean into it. I was just like, I'm just going to try it. And then I'm going to reach out to other dudes that are in the same season of their life that are just like, we don't know that we want to do this. We know we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, so like, let's give it a shot. Yeah. And so, so we did.
And you came.
It was a heck of an experience.
So it was your first time. So this modality of breath work was the first time that you experienced it. We started with breath work, meditation, and then, you know, the sound bath at the very end. Can you share your experience the very first time?
Yeah. Do you want to get do I get deep into this or what? Oh, dude.
Yes,
all right.
absolutely.
Well, I'll start off by saying that my boy San came with me on the first one, right? So my boy San and I, we linked up. We had breakfast beforehand because we're like, hey, let's go eat and then we'll show up. And dude, I was so nervous, dude. I was so like, I think I had purposely avoided thinking about it, right? And so I was just like, it's just an event. And I think I also gave myself the comfort of like, well, it's not my event per se, right? Like it was like they were doing this together, but I know that they're going to be leading the modality. So I was trying to comfort myself of being like, hey, there's no pressure, just chill. And even that morning, I remember we went to go eat breakfast and Saat made a joke because there was a bar at the spot, and he like made a joke, and he's like, "Oh, you guys are serving already?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, we'll take a shot." And then they were like, "Really?" And I'm like, no, I can't. I was like, I can't. and I wanted to. And looking back now, because every time I stop myself from doing, right, I reflect on that, and I'm like, well, why didn't you? You could have. You could have. And I'm like, no, because I think I had enough willpower and I had enough of a vision to know that it was like, no, we're not going to go back to these things.
Right.
Lean into this, bro.
Right.
It's practice. It's practice.
Yeah. Well, backing up too, though. So your role in this event was going to be kind of leading or co-facilitating like a men's circle after the fact, right? To talk through and to integrate. So you did have a role in it.
Right.
But this was the first time that you would actually experience the modality.
Correct. Yeah. And so, the nerves of like, man, I feel very confident and comfortable facilitating the space and like being vulnerable and being open and guiding the conversation. But we're adding this whole new tool in front of it. So it was like, I felt like I was back to square one. I'm like, how do I deal with it? And so, so I was nervous. Even when I got here, I was just like, fuck. And I think I was also in this mindset of, like, they're throwing all these words out there. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Like, all this stuff's going to happen. And I was like, bro, it sounds like I'm just going to take a little 2-hour nap. and then we're going to get to talk about it after. And I was like, it's probably going to be relaxing, right? I was like, that's what we do. And I'm like, okay. I was over here, like, practicing the poses. I was like, we're just going to do this for, like, 2 hours, Just, like, totally just making assumptions on the whole thing, right?
Yes.
And
so then what happened?
Holy cow, dude. It beat the F out of me. I think what helped me the most was I remember, and actually shout out to my guy Chewy, because that was the very first time that I had done any kind of breath work. Right. He put together a little event for men.
Yes.
And
a yoga event, I believe, right?
Yeah, I believe it was. Yeah. It was the what is it? Is it Kundalini?
Kundalini yoga.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So I did that again. I was in this era of just like, let's just try it. Yeah. And my guy Chewy, amazing dude. So I was like, dude, I trust him. Yeah. Like, I'll lean into it. And so I remember him telling me, dude, just remember. He said it to the group. He's like, just remember, there's no wrong way to do this. Yeah. Make this yours. Yeah. And that was very liberating because, I shoot for perfection. And so when he's giving direction, I'm like, I got to make sure I do it right. Mm-hmm. And the whole time I'm just in my head. And so I felt like once he said that, it was almost like I was given permission to just be. Yeah. Right. So I carried that with me. So here, I'm like following the instructions, but I'm also just doing my thing and having moments of discomfort because I've never been shown how to breathe properly, right? Or shown with any kind of intention, right? Or, half the instructions I were given, I'm like, it was almost, I felt like almost claustrophobic in that moment, because it was very, very structured in a way that flows, but for me, it just felt very uncomfortable because as someone who has a lot of anxiety, who I thought I was just cold all the time, I was like, I'm just cold. That's why I'm I'm about to take a test and then it's like 100 degrees outside, but I'm cold, and like I didn't understand. And I was going to talk to my parents about that. So I was just like, I'm just cold all the time.
That's your anxiety.
Yeah, dude. And so I'm like, oh,
your body
that's
couldn't regulate its temperature.
Exactly.
Right.
So you're like breathing. I'm just like breathing with my chest. It's like all the time, Yeah. Or sometimes I get carried away and speak really fast. Like I could not slow down.
Right.
Even now, I feel like sometimes I get carried away, but it was very much present then,
In the breath work?
Yeah, like up before that, I was like, okay, really have to slow down.
Okay.
I'm like freaking out, and so yeah, after diving into the breathing, I just started feeling all kinds of like great sensations in my body. Okay. I think the best way I could explain it, I think even when afterwards, once the experience ended, I think I shared it with you guys. The first thing I thought of was like, dude, did I take anything before coming in here?
Yes, I know.
Like I was like, I almost had to go back to the breakfast spot, and I'm like, no, we didn't take that shot, dude. I was like, we didn't take. I'm like, nobody. I was even thinking like nobody slipped anything into my drink. I was like, no, what the? And I think that really opened my eyes to like, holy cow, my body is capable of doing so many things. Yeah. Yeah. And for the first time in my life, I didn't realize how disconnected I was from my body. And I was like, these motherfuckers are onto something. I was like, okay. Like they're onto something. I get it. I get it.
Yeah. It was profound. And as the facilitator of the breathwork and seeing your experience, I have the benefit and the honor of being able to see how everybody journeys in their own way. And, your journey was very profound. You got what we call lobster claw.
Yeah.
Right, which is a very common and normal side effect of the pranayama breathing, the hyperoxygenated state, and that sort of thing. And then, of course, like most people think like that was very psychedelic, and the component is the same. It accesses the same part of your brain, you know, when you are on something like ayahuasca or acid and that sort of thing. And really, it's like what they call the God molecule or the God experience, is that when you do something like breath work and you lean into the process, you know, you access parts of your body and parts of your brain that feel very psychedelic and very like out of body. And that's the point, because then it helps us to realize like, okay, there's like, it lifts the veil almost of like all of the things that you thought before, your understanding of wellness before, it just kind of like blows that out of the water. And you're like, oh my gosh, okay.
Dude.
Like this is a whole nother layer, like the deepest layer, right?
Right. Yeah, it definitely sent me on a trip. And then that's right. The because I remember I was like, dude, I was like over here throwing gang signs like without even knowing, like, yeah, like my whole body just, but man, I think one thing I remember too is like once I was done, just almost like taking this beating, but just feeling so light. Just feeling so light, feeling very sensitive to like touch, you know?
Got it.
And yeah, like I said, for the first time I felt like connected to myself. I was like, whoa, like my body can do this. And even we talked a little bit about the benefits of it before going into it. And even then I still remember thinking like I'm a lot more open to listening now. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, okay, like sure, okay, you know.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think after that was like, nah, we need to learn more. And I think being okay with where I was in my journey, right? Because sometimes I beat myself up thinking I need to be somewhere that I'm not, right? Where I'm like, I do it for the first time and I'm like, dude, you should be doing this every night. You should be living this life that incorporates a lot of breath work, and you should know everything about it and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, man, like, no, you're right where you need to be.
Yeah.
That's okay.
We're mired by the shoulds,
Right.
right? Like you should. And I think that comes from the fact that when we grow up, our parents are telling us, you should brush your teeth. You should eat this. You should do this. You should do this. This is how you should do it. And, you know, that's why that vernacular is so ingrained in our heads. We've never been given the space of just allowing ourselves to be where we're at, be in our tantrum as a 3-year-old, right? We've never been allowed, and we're learning that we can allow that now. And as adults and older adults, we're having to really work hard at allowing ourselves to just be right where we are.
Dude.
And it's a big epiphany, I think, and it's just a small little redirection. One of the other things that I wanted to bring up in your experience, if I could share, was that,
absolutely.
you know, emotions just started to pour out of you.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm like trying to not give away everything without like setting this expectation for it because it's so different.
Sure.
But yeah, dude, the crying was next level.
Right. So speak to that though, because it's something that I will, you know, share before the breath work, is that all of these are just sensations. It's just information, but through the component of the breath work, right? Our body is going to start to feel different sensations, and then emotional experiences or emotional sensations are going to start to rise to the surface. And there's a scientific component to that, right? As we start to breathe, our brain starts to come out of fight or flight. And then our brain, the part of our brain that allows us to access emotional history, starts to come online. So then it's really just kind of our body, allowing our body to metabolize like history, metabolize emotional history, metabolize experience that's held within our body. And I think it's incredible that our body has the capability.
Yeah, you know, one thing that tripped me out about that too was I vividly remember towards the beginning of me, like, because it turned into a very emotional cry. Like I remember at one point even just thinking like, fuck dude, like it's been you, like you've been slowing yourself down, right? Like all the stuff that you've now like believed of yourself has stopped you. And real quick, because you talked about this earlier, but like the difference between potentials and capabilities, right? Which the potential says that, Kristine, you're supposed to be there because of your potential, right? And then the capability says you're capable of being there, but you are where you need, right? Like, and like reminding myself of that. And so that was like a big thing that came up that's when emotionally I just like broke down, right? But I think what stood out to me at the beginning was that just in a very like relaxed state, I was already like covered in tears, right? And what I remember about that is now tying this into like the work that I do and talking about machismo masculinity was like the understanding of just crying being an emotional release from the body. And so it was like, it didn't need to be an ugly cry that I felt that needed to be released. It's like my body just, it was like sweating. And then I think it really hit me about how much I've been robbed from allowing myself to just cry, because I've been told that men don't cry. And I think I even shared this with the guys that I was like, man, I mean, it really made me think about sweating, where it's like, imagine doing a workout and then flexing. Like, guess what? I didn't sweat. It's like, bro, you're supposed to. Like, it's just supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And we haven't been allowed to.
Yes.
You know? And so I think when I had that moment where I wasn't what I had this like assumption and expectation of like, I'm just going to get very emotional and cry. And like my body just started releasing tears. I was like, whoa, my body just needs to do this sometimes. Yeah.
Yes.
It's wild.
It is wild.
It's wild.
So what do you think changed after receiving this new tool for you? Like immediately after that, did anything, like, was there a light bulb moment? Did something change?
Dude, I think the biggest thing, and I shared with you, that hit me was like, bruh, I've been dishonoring my body so much.
Okay.
I stopped drinking after that, and I was like, and granted, I've drank a few times in moderation, but like for the most part, I don't drink, and because it really hit me like, bruh, this is really a temple. Like,
yes.
like the things that I grew up thinking were so corny that I was like, oh my gosh,
yes.
here we go with these people. I'm like now experiencing it. I'm
yeah.
like, bro, I've been disrespecting the fuck out of myself.
Yes.
Without knowing it. And I was like, dude, I can't keep feeding myself all this stuff all the time. That was the biggest thing. And then I think just the importance in how much control I really do have.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, the anxiety and stuff, like all these things that usually take over that I just kind of like let them be.
Yeah.
And I've learned that there are protective parts of me that are protecting me from things. The thing is, those things don't exist no more.
Yes. Wow.
Right? So it's kind of like I've had to build this relationship with them to realize like, hey man, I love that you're here. The threat's not here. Let's work together.
Yes.
Like, shout out to you for showing up, but we're not doing this.
Right. That's interesting that you say that, because you said the threat's not here, but we're reacting as if the threat is still persistent. And that's just our mind keeping us in that fight or flight, freeze or fawn loop, right? And the power of the breath is it actually takes you out. By simply breathing, it takes your body, your mind out of that fight or flight. And so then you realize, I'm not actually being attacked. You know, what once was attacking me it's not there anymore. And so now what am I going to do with that? Am I going to continue to respond as if I'm being attacked and I'm not? Or am I going to choose different? I do remember you like not drinking that day that you went to go see your family, and then you started cooking healthier, and like you even said something on your story. You're like, "Who is this guy?
Yeah,
like,
who is this guy? Yeah.
You got a yoga mat.
All of a sudden, he does one breath work.
Yes.
Yeah.
You did that, but that, you know what? It's funny and it's facts.
Yeah,
because it has the power to do that.
And you know, I feel like comedy has such a beautiful way of also being, you know, a tool for advocacy. And like, I'm huge on that. Like, I love to laugh. I love to joke around. I love to, and so if it's a tool that I'm like, it's how I operate, how I've always operated. You know, for a long time, it's how I protected myself. Yeah. Right. Like I bounced around a lot from different high schools. So it's like being extroverted wasn't a thing of me just being confident. It was like, I have 1 year before I got to leave this school. So I got to be cool with people, you know? And so there was a time where I was just like, F everyone. Like, I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to be around anyone, because I was like, now that I no longer need to depend off building these connections, I was like, I'm over it. I'm over it, you know? But yeah, coming back full circle with that, and then getting a better understanding of myself, I was just like, man, like these are tools that I want to keep incorporating into my life. You know?
Right.
Like I said, humor being a big part, that it's like, hey, I think for me, it lightens things up, but it's also a way to educate, you know?
It is.
And, so I'm like, damn, like, this is me. This is who I am. Cause I think the second time that we did it now, that's when I think, like, when we checked in, and I was just like, dude, I stopped drinking. Like, I haven't drank since that last one.
There was a lot of other different changes that you were like, I stopped doing X, Y, and Z. And like, again, you may have said it in a joking way that you do one breath work and then all of a sudden your life changes, but that's actually a true thing that can happen if you allow it. And I want to circle all the way back, because you had mentioned earlier, like, you know, man, I look back, like, how did I get here? You know, I can't believe it. I feel so blessed. But I look back at your story. And the difference is that you followed through with intention. Like you put time and attention at looking at things and saying, that's not working and I want something different. And if I want something different, then I have to do something different. And you did. And you put a time and attention and intention into it. And of course, the only thing that can happen from that, you can call it manifestation, whatever it is, but you literally are the alchemist of your life. You're the one in the driver's seat controlling the outcome. And it does start within. And when you start to change within, then you automatically see your life outside of you change. And that's what that magic is. That's what that manifestation is. So like, I have to give you flowers for saying like, heck yeah, let me just try it. But having your life and allowing your life to be fully changed by it, because that was a year ago in June. And now we're sitting here July, a whole year later, we're about to do another one. I think this is our 5th one that we're going to be doing. Yeah. And there's so many beautiful, wonderful, positive changes that, you know, we both have experienced in the last year. And it's such an honor to watch this come to fruition. Like you stepping into your coaching capabilities, because that's a whole nother thing. Like electrician by trade.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, before the podcast, you were sharing like you're at work and you're in the conference room talking to your coworkers about what needs do you have that aren't being met, and being that quote unquote healer by just allowing space. So, and the reason why I bring that up is because I think it's so important, whether you're an electrician, a doctor, a waiter, like pumping gas, I don't care what it is, but it's to have somebody with that awareness in every community, in every family, in every, you know, workplace is huge, because it affects the community around you. And by that, then you're going to affect the larger community. And it's so important. And so thank you for being that in your workspace. And thank you for leaning more into this, you know, coaching aspect of yourselves. Like it's so exciting for me to watch. Tell me a little bit more about like that. And
yeah, well, first, thank you. I accept the flowers wholeheartedly. I definitely know that I wouldn't be here without, you know, amazing individuals like yourself that have really helped to pave the way. I think that have guided and have walked alongside me. Right, because it has been a heck of a journey, and it's representation, right? It's more and more representation. I think the more representation we have of how these tools are applied, because we talked about this before too. Like, I think that at some point, you know, like you're building your house, and it's like if the most efficient tool for that task is a drill, sometimes we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah,
let's just use the drills, right? And I think one of the things that I see happen often in these coaching opportunities and even working with fathers is. We just don't see it being represented. And so it's like we're the workaround of like, well, let me use a screwdriver, or like, let me see if I can do it by hand. And it's like, well, no. The drill's the drill. Like we have to use the drill. That's what it's going to look like. And you're going to maybe hold it differently than I do. It doesn't have to look the same. What you want to use it for might be different than me, but the tool's the tool, and let's work on using the tool. And so I feel that representation is a big piece of that. And so I feel very honored to be able to be in spaces where I get to represent the tradesman, you know, and be like, yo, dude, we can do this. I know it's tougher. I know that our lives and the way that we've set up look a little differently. And so, yeah, we have to show up in a different way in order to make some of these changes, but it's doable. You know, it's very doable. And so, yeah, talking a little more about that part of my life now, it's living my truth. It's living my truth. And I think that's what's so dope about it, where I feel like everywhere I go, I'm like, I want meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
I want meaningful conversations. I want to plant seeds, because, you know, men are taking their lives 4 times as much as women. And my thing is like, look, whatever we're doing is not working. I don't know that I have the answers. I'm just going to try something different.
Yeah.
I'm going to try something different. It's like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be, you know, at the bars having drinks, having these conversations. We should be at a therapy session. I agree 100%. And there's a lot of people that they're not going to the therapy session. So if I got to get my ass into the brewery, which is, you know, a lot of we do monthly meetups now, and it's like we're either at breweries or coffee shops. Okay. And I love it. Like we get to go, and we set some ground rules, and then we just talk.
That's amazing.
You know, we have a container, and we get to talk about these things, and then figure out what we want to do with it too, and keeping it intentional, right? Because that's the other piece of it, is like sometimes even I say some things that I'm like, well, that was a little out of pocket, but where did it come from? You know, maybe we could talk about so many topics there. Like,
Yeah.
and just to like a quick little nugget, like I grew up very homophobic.
Uh-huh.
Right. And that was something that was like, I started to understand like, this isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
But again, where do I go to talk about this?
Mm-hmm.
Where can I share this? And how can I ever feel like I have an opportunity to challenge it for myself when every time I feel like I'm bringing it up, I feel like I have to protect and defend myself.
Right.
Right. And it's conflicting because I'm like, I see the same issue that you have. I like, this isn't right. This shouldn't be done. And, but also like, so where do we go from here with that conversation?
Yeah.
You know?
So facilitating containers to be able to have safe conversation with other men who
huge. I mean, cooking, right? It's another thing that it's like, I didn't know how to cook, you know, and it's like, I grew up very much, I've let go of amazing women when I was younger because I'm like, dude, they're ambitious. They're, you know, they're very loving. They're very sweet. You know, they're great at listening. Like all these boxes I were checked. But at the end of the day, I'm like, she don't know how to cook.
Oh, dang.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, she don't know how to cook. And it's like, now looking back, I'm like, dude, that's such a basic need of survival. Which doesn't discredit how serious it was for me because, like, literally, if you don't know how to cook, I wouldn't date you. And that was so deeply ingrained in me. And I'm like, bro, this isn't right. But when I've been thinking that way for the last 20-something years, it's kind of hard overnight to be like, oh, I don't care about that.
Right.
Because now that means that who's responsible for that need? Well, I am.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the complaint? Is like, I don't know how to cook. Right. So how do I take ownership of that? What can I do? Ask for help or learn how to cook.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's scary. You know, like there's so many fears that I have to tackle and do it. So it's like, I'm just going to take advantage of my privilege instead and be like, nah, I'm going to let a woman do that.
Yeah.
You know? And so I process that now, right? So I have an understanding. That's why I'm able to do this, but I didn't get that at the time. Right. And there was also another piece that was like, how can I throw shade at women while I'm trying to date women? Like that doesn't, why am I doing that? That doesn't make sense, you know? And I started understanding that it was like, there was also women in my life growing up that didn't allow me to cook. Didn't allow me to do my laundry. And I had so much resentment and anger that I'm like, this is your fault. And it turns into this like finger pointing game where I was like, well, this isn't healthy either. This isn't working. So I think that's where like the beauty of the conversations of going into them with an open mind, being willing to listen, has really helped me even just bridge the gap, you know, because I've met great people that I'm like, hey, you know what? Maybe the machismo it's kind of screwed us both.
Yes, it has.
You know, because at the end of the day, you want to be loved. And now that I understand what that looks like in terms of healthy levels of conflict and what our needs are, I'm like, oh, you just want to be loved. So do I. Yeah. It just unfortunately has looked very differently for the both of us.
Yes. That's huge. Our basic core needs are just to be loved, to feel safe, seen, and heard. Everyone. That's it. Everyone, no matter who you are, including our parents and our grandparents. Oof. Yeah. And so when we look at that in terms of our basic core needs of being loved, safe, seen, and heard, and we look at that from a lineage perspective, then we can kind of unfold like, okay, I get it. Like everything is based on survival, right?
Yeah.
And that was, survival was the only thing, the only tool was survival of however you could.
Right.
So tell me, now knowing what you know now after these last several years, and as you have accumulated different tools and learned through your service, right, and your offerings as well, what does the modern macho look like?
Oh, man. I think at the top of it, a big driving force for me is my son, right? My little guy. And modern macho ultimately comes down to being the best version of myself to allow him to be who he wants to be and live the most authentic life so that I can show up in a way that he gets what he needs and not what I would have wanted. And allowing more importantly to let both of those worlds coexist.
That's big.
Because that was the thing is I was trying to bury my childhood in like, okay, cool. If I want to fix this, I got to let go of that in order to show up in a new way for my son. And it was like, dude, that's not fair to you. I need to validate where it comes from. That when someone says like, listening isn't doing everything for people, it's just validating. That when my son says he has a bad day, I don't need to stress out thinking I need to take him to Disneyland.
Sure.
I just need to hold space for 10 seconds.
Wow.
But it was like, I didn't know how to do that. I didn't understand that. So, yeah, I think now it's just being a long life learner.
Yeah.
One conversation at a time, constantly reflecting. I always get excited about like reflecting 6 months later, be like, I want to go look, like even this conversation, going back in 6 months and being like, damn, I was wrong about that. Like, oh, dang, I got to do a better job with that. Like that. Now I love that. I'm like, I feel so liberated knowing that I'm okay with being wrong.
Yeah. That just means that you're growing.
Yeah, dude, I'm trying, man.
Yes.
Putting in the effort.
Yes.
And I'm okay with being wrong instead of trying to be perfect. Because, for me, all it did was slow me down. I never got started.
One of the things that I really kind of hang my hat on is that when I was going through a rough time in my marriage, I went through a period of time where I was like, no woman should be married. We should not be, and just really struggling with the institution of marriage and partnership and that sort of thing. And I was like, really, I guess you could say like against marriage. I'm like, it's a contract. And, I was like going down that road. And a few months later, after George and I got back together, and I had to do some really deep work. I was spending thousands of dollars in therapy, doing alternative holistic modalities, breath work and sound healing and Reiki and that sort of thing myself. Like I look back and I was like, ooh, I was wrong. And now I can look back and say, I think marriage is one of the most beautiful, sacred unions that two people can share in, because it really allows it allows so much.
Yeah.
But I had to change. And I know that my husband had to do his own growth in order for us to come to this point where we're like, man, marriage actually is pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot to get there. And I'm glad I was wrong. Yeah. I'm glad I was wrong about that, because I wouldn't change how we got there.
Sure.
But it feels good to go like, I was wrong.
And it's so interesting, like how a lot of that gets shaped based on what we were shown and the tools we were given, like going back to what I said at the beginning about how my dad would say that people that are young and have kids are idiots. After having like some deeper conversation with my dad and kind of like getting to know him a little more, trying to find the yes in that, I was able to learn that like my dad used to play soccer professionally.
Oh,
and so
wow.
he had actually been offered a contract to go play in South America. And my mom basically told him, like, if you go, like it's either your family or your kid.
Wow.
I'm sorry, it's either your family or soccer.
Your soccer, yeah.
And so obviously resentfully, but my dad stayed. Like he was like, it's the right thing to do, but I shouldn't, right? And so regardless of that whole situation, again, like it wasn't to blame them, but knowing the tools that I had now, I'm like, he didn't have the tools to say. This whole time he's been saying you're young, you're an idiot. I was like, what he was really saying was just like, man, I wasn't able to live the dream that I wanted to live. And granted, those were his choices, but like that's what he was really saying.
Right.
And instead, unfortunately, through that, now and it's a common theme, right? Now he's created this narrative of like, the world is this, and having children is this, right? And it's the same concept of like, even for me, all women are the same. And like something I try to do a better job about now when I speak and reflect is like in my experience, right? All the women are the same in my experience, right? I sat back and I'm like, okay, if all women are the same, there's 8 billion people in this world. There's no way I've dated half of these women. Like, even if I'm a player and I've dated like 100 or 200 of them, like that's still not a lot of women, So I'm like, there's no way that I know them all. And I'm like, in my experience, all the women have been the same. Which is also funny to think about, dude, because I'm like, where are all the good women now? Or like, I even think about if I would have had better men in my life, I would have been set up better. And I think there's some truth to that. And I also, now where I'm at now, I'm like, dude, all those folks they were staying away from me.
Yeah.
Because I was out here just trying to do dumb stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, so they were out there. They just wanted nothing to do with me. They had their boundaries very well set.
Well, so I was going to just say that. It's like, the partners that you are attracting may be the same. And I don't know how to say this, but like, maybe the deeper aspect is what is it about what's happening in here that you're attracting?
There's a common denominator there,
Yeah.
And that's why I think though, like being able to come at it from a place of accountability with compassion.
Sure.
Right? Because a lot of times that's the issue is it's like, no, Carlos, it's your fault. And it's like, that feels really crappy. You know, it doesn't feel good, especially when I didn't have a lot of consequences. I had punishments.
Okay.
So it's like the punishment was something that I was given because of someone else.
Yeah.
Not a consequence that was a very A and B thing, you know, where similar to sports, where it's like you step out of bounds, you lose the ball, right? Like that's a consequence. It's just A and B.
Yeah.
You do take the ball out, this happens. You don't take the ball out, this happens. Punishment was very much based on somebody else's power that they were using over me. That was like, I get to dictate how I'm going to use it. So for me, I was like, I want what I thought was discipline. I'm like, I want nothing to do with it. I'm over it. I'm grown.
Right.
You know? Yeah. And, but yeah, then I just created so many narratives that, again, I think is valid based on the experiences.
Absolutely.
And I had to start questioning them.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do. It's our conditioning. It's our egoic conditioning, circumstances, narratives, you know, life circumstances that really shape that aspect of ourselves, of like all the stories that we have.
Yeah.
That literally is the lens that we see life through.
Right.
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 And it's about dismantling those. And again, circling it back to the tools. The tools help us to dismantle, or what I like to say is unravel or unbecome. You know, and that's really when we open that Pandora's box and we're like, oh, that's there. Okay, this is not working. This isn't serving. So I need to. Yeah.
Tools and community, I think, everything, right? Like together, like some self-reflection, and then being with like-minded individuals. That's what's been the cool thing too, right? Like a lot of times it's like, I thought I was the only one going through this.
Yeah.
We all are, man.
Yes.
Sometimes it just takes that one person to open the door and everyone starts walking in.
Yep. 100%. And that's the beautiful thing about this men's workshop, is that it allows and holds space for men to get together and do a modality or a couple or a few modalities to get them back in touch with their body in order to then self-reflect. And then with the beautiful facilitation by you, because I think you're an incredible facilitator.
Thank you.
You have a really great way of explaining things, of being relatable, of diving deep, asking the right questions. Like that's huge. You ask the right questions. And so after the modalities are experienced, then they get to sit with you in circle and share or not, and just observe and listen. And that's the beautiful thing about this container, is that we offer that to them.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what I'm all about, right? Like, let's start practicing communication. If this sucks, you don't like it, I fuck with that. I like that. Yeah. I like that you're being honest about it. And if that's where we start, that's cool. Let's start talking about it, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really inspiring. And it's always like I said, it keeps me going, seeing how much I'm able to facilitate the space to help, right? To share the experiences with you guys, to see y'all do your thing too. And like, I feed off that energy. And then finding that balance too of like, okay, cool. I want more tools. I want to learn more. I want to be able to continue to do this for myself. And I love seeing how it has really impacted my relationship with my son, you know, where like, if he was here now, I'd be like, hell, you know, like my son knows better. He's scared of me, and he'll side at me and be like, I'm not scared of you. And I love that. Like, I love that we have that banter type of relationship where it's like, we don't need to scare each other. Like we have a level of trust where it's like, we're cool, dude. With things, we have discipline in the house. Things need to get done. We know what needs to get done. You know, you have power. I got power. This is our temple here. You know what I mean?
Dang, that's huge. You've got power. I've got power. This is our temple. Dang, mic drop,
dude.
Mic drop. Holy moly.
It's doable. I'm telling you, it's so doable.
That's cool. That's so cool and so important. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Does that make you feel more like a man in that aspect than before?
Now more than ever.
Yeah.
Now more than ever. You know, I think the scariest part about it was like, I didn't know what was on the other side. And when I lacked representation too, it was like, I don't know where we're going to go with this.
Yeah.
But now more than ever that I'm like, I still believe in being tough. And the tough thing to do was to make that phone call to go to therapy, was to challenge my way of thinking, to be okay with embracing crying, to understand that it doesn't make me any less of a human being to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
That it takes a lot of courage to ask for help.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage to admit that you're wrong.
Yeah. Oh.
So I think it's all still there. It's just being redefined, right?
Absolutely. It's a human experience. We're never going to get rid of all of the things. But now that we have the tools to be able to face the things, it makes all the difference in the world, right? We're never going to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But we have tools, and that's beautiful. And we're raising children, and we're modeling what it looks like to use the tools, what it looks like to be like, hey, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Let me try that again.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things I look forward to too, is like once he gets older and being able to have these deep conversations with him where I could learn about like, where did I fail?
Yeah.
Because even though I'm learning and I'm having all these great tools, it's not, okay, I'm doing better than before, that's enough.
Yeah.
For me, I'm like, no. If there's even more tools now, I want to use them, or I can live a very present life with him,
I love it.
So I'm like, it'll be cool to look back and be like, dang, dude, I fell short here. Or like, turns out that was wrong. That's not what you really needed. I could have communicated. But I think, again, the freedom now is that I'm okay with being wrong, and that I know how to apologize, and I know how to be a man of my word and do my best to make those changes, which unfortunately, like, my parents were perfect growing up. I not once did I ever hear an apology.
Sure.
And again, that no shade to them. They just didn't have the tools,
Correct.
Which makes me, like I said, my heart hurts knowing if they were doing that with the tools they had, we go back a couple more generations and it's like, man, the tools that were lacking there.
Right. 100%. But we're kind of on this precipice where things are the tides are turning and we're starting to shift. The generations are starting to, come online more. So it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no doubt.
Thank you so much for
thank
sharing
you for
your
having
story.
me,
So I always like to end the podcast with a question. And that is there a song or a sound that sings you home?
Oh, man. The first song that came to my mind right now was Backstreet Freestyle by Kendrick Lamar.
Okay.
Something about that song is always just like, puts me in a mood.
Okay.
Puts me in a mood.
And you're a singer too. I know that you like to sing a lot of,
yeah. Throwing me into the bus here, huh?
Totally. Yes.
Yeah, I could definitely sell out some karaoke nights.
Amazing. How do people work with you? How do they find you?
They can check out the website, themodernmacho.com, the Instagram @themodernmacho. Send a DM if any of this resonates.
Yeah.
Need to hold space. We meet up once a month. You can sign up for our email list, and once a month we meet up doing social hours in different locations anywhere around the Inland Empire, whether it's a brewery or a coffee shop.
Okay.
Usually the week of, we'll send out the location that we're meeting at.
Okay.
And then we just get to meet monthly.
Amazing. And then you will be there facilitating our Anchor into Healing men's retreat on August 10th. So we're super excited. This will be our 5th round. And we're excited. So thank you so much.
Thank you again for having me. I appreciate you.
Love
Appreciate
you
you listening
Mwah.
and sharing. I love you.